second panel session, this one on DPPA focused, topic in which there's a lot of interest. We have assembled a esteemed, experienced, knowledgeable panel here for you today to share their thoughts, and I'm going to introduce them in just a moment. First of all, just to introduce myself, my name is Giles Cooper. I'm a partner with Allens Linklaters law firm. We are a law firm that's been in this market for 30 years. I myself have been here for 24 years. We've always focused on energy sector development. Since the early days of energy, private sector investment, the NUM concern, gas pipeline basin, all the BOT projects in some way, shape or form, the renewable energy boom, and DPPA, which is a topic very, very close to my heart. I was involved in consulting in the early days in 2019 on the design of the program, hoping that we may have seen it come to life before now, but nevertheless I think we're getting closer and closer. So it's a great pleasure to be here today and moderate this panel. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes setting the scene for you before I introduce the panelists, and with a couple of slides. The key point that sort of underpins, I think, this whole discussion is that the DPPA program is very, very fitting of both the targets of both public and private sectors in Vietnam. And this is really crucial because it's that intersection of goals that will really drive it forward in a successful way, I think. As you surely know, there are many companies that have voluntary and or mandatory commitments to procure renewable energy. RE100 is just one of those initiatives, but there are others, the ACT, UN Alliance on Sustainable Fashion, Science-Based Targets Initiative, and so on. There are over 400 RE100 companies, as an example, and at least 10% of those have operations in Vietnam already. There are also pull factors, of course, that support the DPPA or private sector power procurement. As we all know, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism has recently taken effect with respect to some commodities as of 1st of October, and this is a sort of financial inducement as well to participate and procure renewable energy. At the same time, of course, Vietnam is very keen and has established a wonderful environment to attract foreign direct investment, and it's incumbent upon them, the country and the leaders, to continue to develop an environment that will allow for that attraction to continue and grow in the future. And at the same time, as many of you know, without some significant mitigation and management efforts, we are going to be short of power in parts of the country. That's the forecast. So there are, alignment of interests in generating new sources of power quickly and efficiently as possible, and private sector can help meet those goals a little bit. Okay, next slide, please. Just very quickly, I just want to, I'm not going to run through this in any detail, but this is a chronological history of the DPPA. As a matter of fact, it sort of really first came up in 2016. It was the #1 recommendation of the VBF's made an energy plan in 2016 that the government move on a DPPA. That request was heeded, and later in around 2017 the initiative began to commence design and development of the DPPA program. Since that time we've had numerous drafts, consultations and reports on the DPPA, and I just want to highlight that in the past month or so, in fact, after a period of relative quiet, there's been quite a lot of action, and in a minute I'll just talk briefly about what that means. But yeah, that's the kind of full timeline. Next slide, please. I don't want to spend too long on this either, but most of you will have seen this. The point I want to make about this slide is that this represents the very latest proposed design of the DPPA. For those who may not be aware, there have been a couple of reports. As I said, 23rd of September, the MOIT reported to the PM, and then again on the 24th of October. So that 24th October report and comments were made, at least came to my knowledge, just this week. So this represents the very latest design. It's very similar to what you will have seen before. The point is that certain things have moved around over the years, but now we're back at a position similar to a model that was commenced with. The key differences here from, I suppose, what was seen earlier in the year are that the consumer in the top right there will pay the spot price to the electricity retailer, not the retail price. The spot price plus DPPA service-related charges, the amounts of which are yet to be determined, but no longer the retail price there as previously. And another key difference that we may have an opportunity to touch on is that the contract for difference in the very top of the screen there, there is going, the proposal is that there will be a standard form, CFD, and that the contract strike price agreed under the CFD will be in some way capped or limited or restricted in line with the electricity generation price frame. So you can look at that at your leisure. Another very important point on the next slide is that while for years the DPPA program was a virtual-only program, earlier this year for the first time there was a new model introduced into it, which is the direct wire private PPA, which is much more simple model, as you can see on the screen there, simply where the generator and the off-taker have a direct transmission wire between them and contract directly. Interestingly, and again, we may have time to talk about it, but the latest draft report on DPPA would cap the price at which the private generator can sell its power to the off-taker under this physical DPPA regime. Next slide, please. I think I've probably actually covered most of these. I just want to note that some of these changes, you know, that they are of significance. As I said, we've seen the model move over time from a virtual only to include also a direct option. We've seen various forms of the regulation proposed, Prime Minister decision, government decree, even an MOIT circular, I believe. The latest proposal from last week is that it will be a government decree, but subject, of course, to approval. This is all still in draft form. The implications really for these, the forms moving around are that, number one, the time it might take to approve and formalize the regulation, and number two, also the standing of the regulation under Vietnamese law. Circulars, for example, can be changed much more easily than government decrees, and so on. So there is a certain sort of hierarchy of legal instruments, and that is relevant to participants in the DPPA as they plan their commercial agreements. There's a big, another major change, and I'll be as quick as possible, is that it was, of course, a pilot scheme, proposed as a pilot scheme, 1,000 megawatt cap pilot scheme initially for many years. In the latest or most recent drafts, that has been abandoned, and the idea is to develop it immediately as a fully fledged permanent regulation with no cap on participation. Similarly, the barrier for entry in the virtual element has been reduced. In the earlier iterations of the regulation, there was a minimum 30 megawatt participation in the virtual model through the wholesale market. That has now been reduced to 10 megawatts in the latest draft regulation, and there's no upper limit on the program anymore. In the case of physical DPPAs, there's no minimum or maximum limit proposed in the latest regulation. Finally, as I said, the CFD, it looks like on the latest regulation will have to follow a model form, and that's possibly an area of contention to be discussed, and that the price, or the strike price in the CFD will be capped as well. There is that question mark about the price payable under the direct physical PPA as well. So hopefully that sets the scene just a little bit for you as we turn to engage with our esteemed panelists. I'm going to just introduce them one at a time as they sit on my left, and ask them to say a few words about themselves and respond to an initial question. So first of all, on my left, it's my pleasure to welcome Ms. Suji Kang, Program Director for the Asia Clean Energy Coalition. Suji, may I ask you to say a few words, and perhaps in particular, I know that the Asia Clean Energy Coalition is a coalition of corporations with an interest in procuring renewable energy. Demand side factors are, of course, critical to the successful DPPA implementation. Can you please speak a little to the drivers behind the demand of your corporate members?
Uh, uh, Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm Suji, Program Director of Asia Clean Energy Coalition, which was launched just last year during COP27, and founded by the World Resource Institute, the Climate Group, and Global Wind Energy Council to really convene the world leading influential buyers such as Google, Meta, Apple, Amazon, Samsung, Nike, and many others, together with the sellers and financiers to really work together to make better policy environment in Asia. So we're trying to be a Asia-focused regional platform where we collaborate and coordinate with the existing partners and key players in the market who are really aligned to accelerate the renewable electricity procurement for corporates. So as response to your question, Giles, thank you very much for your kind introduction and for the question as well. Well, as we all know, we're at a critical time when all corporates are really ramping up their commitments on scaling renewable electricity procurement as means to meet their net zero goal. And our members such as Google, Apple, Nike, IKEA, and many others are also driving these commitments, and they're also pushing these commitments down to the supply chains. Since availability of renewable electricity is becoming a key driving factor for companies to decide where to invest and where to base their operations, a failure in securing the renewable electricity at scale will inevitably cause huge economic risks in the country. And also, by not having renewable electricity secured in the country, it is also very disadvantageous for the local companies because these are the ones who really want to keep up and maintain a good relationship with the multinational corporations as them to be their partner, customer, and potential customers. So in order to secure these investments and operations from the multinational corporations, it's quite apparent that the DPPA is being a driving force here, as it is projected by many corporates to be one of the most effective pathways for them to participate in acceleration of clean energy transition. So these are some of the key points I really want to highlight as the key driving factors of DPPA in Vietnam in perspectives of corporates. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suji. Much appreciated. And now I'd like to move down the line and introduce Mr. Torben Minko, Managing Director for B. Brown. Torben, can you say a word about yourself and B. Brown, and then perhaps also share with us, the B. Brown's personal journey and motivations to participate in the renewable energy DPPA program.
All right, thank you. So to myself, I'm already almost a decade in Vietnam and saw a lot of up and downs and a lot of regulations and moving on. But I think we're in a critical time right now, and Vietnam is also in a critical pathway. As to B. Brown, we are here since 30 years, and we are one of the biggest German investors here, which comes also with responsibility that we are having. Coming back to your questions and also echoing a little bit what you are saying, we have an off-taker. Obviously, we would like to look into the chance to get green energy as part of our transition. And you are asking why we as B. Brown, we are a medical device and pharmaceutical company, why we are doing this. Basically, what we need to see is also the global market and the demand of our customers, right? So if you run a company, you need to see where the trend is moving, and I can say customers are asking us to change, and we all should change. We are in a critical point of time, and we want to change. So coming back to customers, so from the customer perspective and an off-taker, one part of the entire situation becoming CO2 neutral, all the renewable energy is of course to get green energy, Another part is, as a company, you need to take care and see that you become energy efficient. That's one part. So you need to take part of yourself. You need to look into your company. But when you look into the green energy, this is one of the main part and main driver we are looking for. So we as B. Braun, we commit to ourselves. If we want to invest further in Vietnam, currently we have an investment of around 150 million here. And we would like to double our investment here in Vietnam. This will only be possible if we get green energy. And I think that's the main and clear message I would like to send here. Without green energy, there will be no further investment. All the new buildings we are building need to get green energy. And I think that's the message we also need to deliver. And I also hope that this will be understood. Because at the end of the day, Vietnam will be in competition with its neighboring countries. We're talking about Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia. And if we are not fast enough here in Vietnam, further investment and future investment will be driven somewhere else in the world. Because at the end of the day, as a multinational company, and we are a lot of European companies here today, we need to follow also the CSRD, so the Corporate Social Responsibility Directive, which comes from the EU. And that means all the companies need to audit themselves by 2025 and 2026. So there's no way back. So on one side, we have the customers who are demanding. On the other side, there are directions also from the European Union that are demanding. And we need to move on. And as an off-taker, we are obviously looking for solutions. And I think DPPA is a great solution once it's implemented, because that would give us the power to purchase directly. Just one last sentence, maybe one last thought before we can move on. We as B. Braun, we are looking also into rooftop solar. Yeah? It's a little bit different topic here offsite, but rooftop solar, just to put it on your own facilities, is not efficient enough. That's number one, obviously, if everybody is doing by themselves. And it can only cover a little bit of your energy. So the really key point and the really change that can be done is once DPPA comes into place, and we as an off-taker can really be part of that.
Thank you, Torben. Much appreciated. I'm going to move down. Mr. Bruno Jaspert, Managing Director of Deep Sea. Bruno, introduce yourself, but please, I'd like you to explain to me and the audience, what is your role, interest in DPPA? Deep Sea is an industrial zone and logistics hub developer. Are you a demand or a supply side participant?
Good morning. My name is Bruno. I am not for 10 years in Vietnam, like Torben, only 5. But we work much harder, so it's the same. I believe we take a very specific position because we are actually on the path of reinventing ourselves from being a consumer into a generator. But we are not a standalone consumer, and I need to explain to all of you, Deep Sea Industrial Zones has chosen to set up its own electricity distribution company. So we have a company called Deep Sea Green Energy that delivers 100% all the electricity to all our customers in our zones. That in itself is already relatively unique, and what we have added to that is that our customers are being serviced for what they are looking for. Quality of electricity, abundance if needed, and at least stability if possible. But as Torben has said, and also Suji, today, the first question that new investors ask, what is the source of your energy? The very first question they ask, can we get 100% green energy guarantee from you? Obviously, anyone who says yes in Vietnam today is lying. It's not possible. It's one of the reasons why I'm sitting here. I can tell you today, it's not happening. I can also tell you tomorrow, if the DPPA as a framework is fully approved, it's still not happening. Because there are huge problems if now everyone will start concluding on DPPAs. Because in the end, we're gonna drive EVN and its grid distributors into the ground. So our own solution is a bit different. That means that we will try to become independent. Deep Sea is already behind the grid, meaning the whole supply we get today, bar what we generate from renewables ourselves, we get it from EVN, but we redistribute without the DPPA. So we are basically a lab for possible business models, how you can run it. Having said that, I've seen the views on DPPA already go from left to right and back to left. I do believe there are business model issues with it. I also believe there are some big technical issues. Imagine I have an abundance of green energy. Torben needs it. He just said he needs it. So I give him a DPPA. Good for you, right? But in reality, nothing happens because the grid can't take it. And it's the grid today, in my view, which is the big unspoken truth in the room. The grid is not ready to run real DPPAs at full strength. So I believe that one partial solution is the one that I advocate, that is that industrial zones should be seen as a driver behind energy change. And we can become a generator. We can become an energy machine for all of our investors. So, and that's the good part. I can tell Torben he can invest another 150 million tomorrow, because when you come to us, we will make sure that we can invest in green energy. So today we have on paper a commitment that we will deliver by 2030, 30% of our energy mix, guaranteed our commitment, from renewable sources without a DPPA, because we do it ourselves. There's many other related issues, but we can come to that later.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Okay, moving down, Mr. Robert Helm, Head of Offshore Wind of CIP's New Market Fund. Robert, you're obviously a developer and supplier of green energy. The DPPA would create a brand new market for developers in Vietnam. Maybe may I ask you please to introduce yourself briefly and then respond to the question of how important or vital it is for Vietnam to open that market for developers like yourselves.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. So my name is Robert. I represent a company called Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, or CAP. CAP probably best described as being both a development company and an investor. On the developer side, we focus mostly on offshore wind, also onshore wind and solar PV. We have about 14 gigawatt of operational projects and projects in construction at the moment. A pipeline of roughly 120 gigawatt around the world. We have built offshore wind in the UK, Germany. We're currently building the first commercial scale offshore wind farm in the US. We build in Taiwan, in Korea, hopefully soon in Vietnam as well. On the investor side, we are one of the largest, maybe currently the largest dedicated investor in renewable energy projects with roughly $28 billion of funds committed entirely to renewable energy. In Vietnam, we've been for about 4 years now, with quite a significant presence, as we think, with 25 people here in Hanoi, working mostly on projects in Binh Tran, our Lagan project in Ninh Thuan, Hai Phong, also pursuing onshore pipeline and solar PV pipeline in the country. We're working quite closely with the supply chain in the country as well, not only for our Vietnamese projects, but also for our international projects. Just recently, we've awarded a $200 million contract to a consortium including PTSC to supply into our Taiwanese offshore project under construction. Yeah, and we intend to stay in the country really, which has quite a strategic importance to us, ready to invest and execute the projects as soon as we are, I'd say, allowed to do so. On your question on how relevant PPAs, corporate PPAs, and DPPAs really are. I mean, I think it's obviously crucial to satisfy the growing electricity demand of the large corporates in the country. Growing demand also on the back of the nearshoring, friendshoring trends that we're seeing at the moment. And I also think that the large corporates can and should play a quite significant role on the counterparty side of the offtake agreements for the large scale assets. Large balance sheets obviously being capable of enabling funding both on the equity side and the debt side for these large scale projects. So in that way they will and should support the quite ambitious renewable energy ambition of the country. However, I think Bruno also just alluded to it as well. I mean, one shouldn't forget that I think most of the large-scale projects that at least we are focusing on, I mean, they will be grid connected. They will have to be grid connected, and one should keep in mind that the TSO, EVN, obviously the SOEs and the government as such are also playing a quite significant role in the rollout of in addressing the energy challenge. So while the corporate players can and should play a significant role, I think it is a combination of the corporate world and then the government and the SOEs and so on, providing the grid that we all need to connect these projects.
Thank you very much, Robert. Much appreciated. And last but not least, the man with the money, Mr. Phát Thai, Deputy Director, Large Corporate Banking Department of Vietcombank. Good morning, Mr. Thai. Can I ask you please say a few words to introduce yourself and maybe address the question of what you as a lender, what sort of features you would really be looking for in a DPPA program that you would consider would provide an attractive environment for you or the bank as a lender to these projects?
Thank you, Joyce. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and I am Deputy Director of the Large Corporate Banking Department of Vietcombank, and I am in charge of the bank's relations with a number of large electricity generators like EVN, Vinacon Min Power, and so on and so forth, like electricity distribution companies like EVN Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh, across the countries, and a number of others, large corporates. And regarding the Vietcombank, we have about, in terms of the exposure to the electricity industry, related, I mean, in the last sense, we have about 2.5 billion loan book for that, and more than 80% of those are in green energy, either hydroelectricity, wind and solar power, and solar farm as well. So, our total loan book for in Vietnam by now is more than 46 billion. So I think we are in good position to be able to partner with you in that sense. And regarding the features that we look for in a DPPA programs, I think I want to go elaborate a little bit more on from the logic of the lender. As a lender, what we look for foremost is the capacity or the ability to repay the loan. And in order to repay the loan, you need to have the stable and profitable revenue stream from the projects. That's really important. So in terms of profitable revenue stream, we talk about the price. And the price here should be fair in a sense that it should cover, I mean, after deducting all the costs, the operating and the depreciation, whatever, still give the developer some decent return. And that's the one thing. The other things that we look for in the stability of the revenue stream is that the term, the contract, the longer the better. The longer the better. Yeah, and if for some reason, even you have the long-term contract, and for some reason the contract expires in advance, then we need to look at the DPPA mechanism or market to see how quickly and how easily the renewable energy developer could find a new buyers, and that speak more for on the quality of the buyers as well. Here we have big names like Amazon or industrial zone service provider like Brown, Mr. Bruno. Then that would be good. And we need to see big names there and how stable they are. And also we need some flexibility. What I mean by flexibility is that in terms of pricing, you know, at the start, at the early renewable energy developer, you come in and you sell at the price. But later on, let's say when your project come into operations, then you have new developers with cheaper and more efficient technologies. Then you know, after 3 or 5 years providing or serving or providing electricity to your clients, then you have new guys coming in, much cheaper price. And then now it comes back to the question of fair price. And so that's what we think. And so DPPA is a mechanism of, you know, is a platform for everybody to deliver the electricity. But we also need to think in terms of other policy, in terms of accounting or tax, in terms of depreciation, maybe for the early mover and developers in renewable energies, you have some treatment on the tax and on depreciation, so that they can depreciate quickly. So when the new guys coming in, the old developers still have some competitiveness against the new guys. And so that's the things that I think that really speak to the capacity to repay, and that's how we look for in granting a loan. Thank you.
Fantastic. I am actually going to ask each of the panelists essentially that same question. So I'm going to come back down and we'll get to Bruno. You can answer the same thing, because there are various interests that, you know, one could say are competing in a program like this, but of course they all need to coalesce and find alignment to you know, enable a successful program. So I'm going to essentially ask the same question. I'm going to start with Suji. Can you share with us, you know, from your perspective, the coalition and the people you represent, you know, what are some of the features of a DPPA that would be would signal an effective, functional, sustainable, valuable DPPA program? And if I may add, and if the opportunity arises, if there are any other examples from other markets that you've been involved in or projects that you're aware of, just on a macro level to share on these features, please do so share.
Thank you, Giles, for the question. Well, theoretically speaking, the features that make DPPA mechanism successful are very clear. It's very straightforward. So first, transparency and clear set of rules for pricing mechanisms, and the structuring its system should be number one, especially in monopoly market. And secondly, economic viability. No, I changed my mind. I'm going to put it as the first because I'm here to stand for the corporates. Economic viability should be number one feature to be considered in terms of designing DPPA. Well, DPPA offers opportunities for developers to receive steady revenues for a long term. But we really have to emphasize that this should be also be designed in a way it benefits the consumers who are willing to sign the DPPA, as in a way they can do cost savings. And well participated DPPA by a variety of companies would be also important by providing learning opportunities and building more experiences for the market to better cope with the future wholesale electricity market as well. And lastly, this is like something associated to the first point I brought up, the economic viability. So we would need the government to come up with the tax credits. Any form of incentives would be very important in terms of making the price affordable for the consumers, so that the power price will be comparable to the retail power costs. Well, we are pretty optimistic, as I said, on implementation of these DPPA mechanisms in Asia, as we are gaining more support from the governments in countries like Korea, Japan, India. Although the systems there are not perfect, at least we have it implemented in the market so that it at least provide a room for the improvement. And that's what's happening in these markets as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Torben, can I ask you to speak to that as a buy-side participant? You know, what are the key features for you?
Yeah, I would like to put it first of all a little bit into perspective that I'm talking about energy features today. Yeah, so if you asked me 2 or 3 years ago, how about your energy? I would just say, okay, yeah, just give me some energy and then we will do the rest. Now I'm sitting here talking about features of energy as an off-taker. So this is a quite interesting shift what we are doing, but it also shows again the importance, obviously. So if you talk about somehow the features, yes, I would like to echo also what you were saying, and also this is in the directive of my colleague from Vietcombank. Obviously, the price is the key. Yes, we want all to have the transition, and I believe that you mentioned before that we need to have flexibility, where I was going a little bit into a small shock, because basically if you're an investor, you don't want to have flexibility which comes with uncertainty, prices going up, prices going down. This was basically a very toxic environment for investors. Yeah? So if you're an investor, you want stability. And stability comes with stable prices, no matter what. So from an off-taker perspective, we need stable prices. And the prices cannot increase dramatically, because then there will be no transition. And companies cannot afford a much higher price. So I would suggest, or from my point of view, I understand that investments need to be made. I understand that it comes with a certain cost and risks as well. But I assume that might be also some kind of an incentive for the Vietnamese government to come along and say, okay, we don't need tax incentives for these big guys coming here, but we incentivize them by giving them green energy for the same price, just as an example. And I think we need to move in towards this direction, because no matter where the energy is coming from, coal or wind farms, solar farms, and so on, as an off-taker, the price needs to be the same. Yeah? So when it comes back to the feature, yeah, price, affordability, and obviously we need to make sure that once we are signing the deal, that the energy is also coming. Yeah? We had in the past 2 or 3 months some energy shortage here in Hanoi, and I think this is a good way now to really rethink how we can do that and how we can get that. My last point is, we are talking about DPPAs. Yes, that means we get directly the energy. I understand that most of the solar farms will be in the south. the grid from the south to the north isn't there or cannot cope with the energy. So we should also talk about VPPAs, right, which is virtual power agreements, where we could offtake or take some of the power generated in the south. So I think there are several parts that we can do. Important is, as I said before, as an investor, we need stability, we need a stable price, an affordable price, and we need a commitment as well, as I said before.
Thank you, Torben. Bruno, from your rather unique perspective here, can you share with us maybe a response to what Mr. Tai said? I think you wanted to say something, but then your view on some features that make a successful DPPA program from your perspective.
Yeah, I actually wanted to intervene, but then I thought, okay, perhaps it's more polite to wait till everybody's finished. I need to ask something to the public, because it's fine that we're sitting here. All of you buy electricity, correct? How many of you think your electricity today is cheap? Raise your hand if you think electricity is cheap. I'll give you the right answer afterwards. So you look around, who's raising their hand, right? You know, do it one more time, because someone had the wrong answer. Okay. So I need to break you the news. Electricity in Vietnam is very cheap. If you have a medium-sized company like my neighbor, and he would produce exactly the same things in China, he would pay at least 20 to 25% more. That is not a story, it's a fact. Now, the second fact I need to share with you is that we all want green energy. How many of you want to pay more to get green energy? Raise your hand. Okay. And now how many of you would like to buy green energy if you get incentivized by the government? And now you should all raise your hand, obviously. Yeah, thank you. And I think that sums up the real problem. The real problem is not the framework. We've been harping on about DPPA for years, and I can guarantee you, sooner or later we will have it. The lawyers will be happy, the banks will be happy, the investors will be happy. It exists. And then, what are we going to do? We cannot do it. We have to talk about virtual DPPAs because the grid can't do it. So I come from a very small European country that can only survive by being very practical. And I believe that we should start with the big fish. Like my colleague is looking after the big accounts. I believe change starts with big chunks at a time. And I believe the change should start from the beating heart of this growing economy, and that is industrial zones. That's not to further my case, because it makes my cost of goods sold a lot more expensive than it should be. But it does solve something for our customers. And I am 100% convinced that the average investor today is willing to pay more for what Torben said, stable electricity, green electricity. The question is, how are we going to do it? And I believe a DPPA is a solution. But I fear, to give you the bad news once again, that it's not for tomorrow and not for the day after. The framework, perhaps, yes, but how are we going to put that in motion? So my own view is that big consumers should do it themselves without the grid. And it's possible. Technically, it's possible. We can sit together with this investing company and say, please, throw me an offshore wind farm and I'll take it all. And then we're talking about a tool for change on short term. Because I believe if you take Torben as the average investor, of course you're better than the average one. Okay. But if we would do that, and you say, you know what, by 2035, I can give you what you want, I think that will be a slight dampener on the investment climate. So, for me, there is only one thing that needs to be sorted first. Is the price of electricity in Vietnam today fair or not? If you're willing to increase the price, and perhaps offset partially by incentives, then the DPPA can become a real success, because then there will be money to boost the grid. Then it will be possible to open up and become transparent. Because today, you can buy whatever you want. You go to a shop, they say, I want it, I bought it, great, but you can't get it out of the shop. My 5 pence on it.
Very good, 5 cents worth of value. Thank you very much, Bruno. Robert, can I turn to you? It's essentially the same question. I mean, we've heard from a number of people that price is important. I mean, from your perspective as a supplier, I mean, are you interested in a fixed long-term price? And let me just overlay that with a question about if the design has a template CFD that is thrust upon you with a cap to the strike contract price, how attractive is that going to be for you? How does that feature in your assessment of the design of the program overall?
Yeah. Well, I guess as an equity investor, we have mostly the same interest as the lenders. So obviously, long-term fixed contracts are nice. That's clear. But I also agree, with what Torben and Bruno just said. Mainly, I think the issue is not so much in the contracts and what kind of features are important in these contracts. These contracts, they have been done all over the world. That is, Vietnam doesn't have to invent the wheel again, right? I mean, at large scale, several hundred megawatts of these corporate PPAs have been done in many countries around the world. In Taiwan, where we also are, one of our competitors has done a 920 megawatt PPA on an offshore wind farm. So it's all been done, and it doesn't have to be invented. Where the real challenges are that have to be fixed in order to get this moving is much earlier in the process. This is about, as also has been said before, it is about the grid. It is about being able to transport the energy from the south to the north, for example. I mean, it is about curtailment and so on. As Torben said, I mean, he needs the energy uncurtailed, and he needs to be certain that it actually arrives. And mostly the fundamental, factors of building cheap energy assets are not where the demand is, at least in Vietnam. Obviously in the south, we can probably produce 30-40% lower cost of energy. So what we really have to be discussing is how do we solve the grid? How do we solve the curtailment issue? And we also have to solve other things. I mean, for us, when it comes to regulatory steps that are needed, I mean, we are not even thinking about the PPAs and the DPPAs and all these kind of things. I mean, we think about getting the exclusive right to do surveys on a part of the seabed in order to then spend. I mean, we've already contracted local players of more than $10 million, and these contracts are waiting in order to do the surveys on these areas, because we don't have a survey license. Once we have that survey license, we can spend, let's say, $50 million on we can spend real development money on these energy projects without even having a clue about how we essentially and ultimately will sell that power. So we are at a totally different place in the value chain, much earlier, and where it really needs to be discussed right now. How do we do that? And again, as I said before, EVN, the SOEs, the government, everyone has to be involved in this. This is not a corporate game. We need the grid. We need the wheeling. We need to understand how we deal with wheeling, how we deal with curtailment risk, and so on, and so on, and so on. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We have 50% of the frame of the band of the price of electricity is 50% of the frame that's set by the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Okay, so for this DPPA, we think it's a positive development. And but however, in order to evaluate any projects, I mean, renewable energy is not easy. I think it's even more, a little bit more complicated than before. Before, we have to look at the developer, their financial standing, their capacities, and their operational excellence, how quick and how fast and how stable they are in producing, in setting up the facilities, and looking at their PPA contract. That's it. And their partner is now EVN. EVN, even they are making the loss, but their equity base is so large. And the government understands the situation. So I think that the process of increasing the electricity price is in place, in motion. Maybe slow, maybe quick, depending on the overall macroeconomic situation, either the inflation or on the interest rate, environment or exchange rate, something like that. But the price is in place. So I don't have to worry about the buyer. But now as a lender, we have to worry so much about the buyers. Not many companies can, the projects, the renewable energy projects can last for 12 years, 15 years, 18 years, 20 years. And I don't know whether the buyers can be there for 20 years. I don't know. And if there's one single buyer, then the possibility of that company to be our business or be merged or be bought by someone else is high. If you have a group of buyers, then it's better. So we also need to look at the overall market. If the overall market is larger, the demand side is larger and larger, and that is better. Yeah, and by now, you look in the near future. We all talk about the great constraints. The Prime Minister understands that, and he forced the EVN and the National Transmission Company Corporation is also one of my clients. So very hard. But from the past experience, by now we have the national grid from through the middle of the country, the central, the country from Nghệ to Hưng Yên. For that 500 kilometers grid. But previous experience, we know that for that grid, that length, the total time take about 3 to 4 years. Not 1 year. So if the grid situation is expect to be solved, we expect even we quicken up the process 2 years, maybe 2.5, because they have to go all over the legal process of setting up the investment, and they're all over the legal process of doing the constructions, and they get all through so many provinces in between. So that's a very, very long. In this current environment, it takes a lot of time too, and I just want to make myself a little bit clear on the idea of flexibility. I mean that the flexibility here is not the price. I want the price to be within a range. The price, even when for example, the buyers are not there anymore, the new buyer coming in, and they have a lot of choice, because at that moment, then there are new developers they can offer cheaper price of electricity. Then the new buyers will have to negotiate with the old developers within the price frame, and the flexibility here is more on the incentive side, like Mr. Tobin said, is that the incentive that that they may give some tax credit or tax treatment, or they can have some depreciation, quick depreciation, so that they can pay the tax less. Does that give them some financial kind of incentive? So basically, my answer.
Thank you, Mr. Tai. I am sure there are a lot of questions in the room. It's a long-standing topic with a lot of coverage over the past few years, so I'm sure there are questions. Anyone like to volunteer?
Matthias Kotes in Solar. I'm very grateful to Bruno to point out to the elephant in the room, power prices here in Vietnam. Power is far too cheap. It's undervalued. It's in the way to innovation and especially to investment. And talking about DPPA, at this time, and for instance for solar PV, prices for power plants, power systems are at an all-time low, 50% lower than it was 9 months ago. I can guarantee that we can anywhere here in Vietnam produce a power between, let's say, 5.5 and 7 US dollar cents per kilowatt hour. So costs is not really a problem. The second thing is for DPPA specifically, and for a company like Torben, B. Brown, the idea is not to transfer power from Ninh Thuan to Hanoi. It is to produce a power needed in the vicinity. And there are technologies available to do this cost effectively, mostly solar PV again, because on your roof you don't have enough power. So coming to my question, what can we do in order to come up with a sensible DPPA scheme in order to cater to the industry and to the commercial needs? I don't know who would answer that, but what can be done? It's a policy. It's not technology, and it's not grid. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone like to take that one?
I don't have the answer anyway. And I'm hugely underpaid if I know the answer. But perhaps we should link it up to something that was said before. I think, why would you like to have a DPPA? Because you want to have green energy credits, or you want to have a cheaper price, or you want to have a more stable electricity supply. Already, most of what I just said, in today's Vietnam, it's not possible. And I think the part that was not a question, the price is indeed too cheap if you want to drive innovation into the energy market. But the price is very cheap to attract investors to Vietnam. And that is the big pain. We just heard who decides on the price. Not the cost of producing the price, or of producing the electricity is governing the price today. EVN makes a loss. So it's obviously the government who decides what the price will be. And it's a tool to attract investors. But if you, as a government, also commit that you're going to be carbon neutral by 2050, I think sooner or later we can come up with a nice policy if we have decided what takes priority. Your long-term carbon neutrality or your short-term drive to create economic growth and attract investors. And unfortunately, as I said, I'm not smart enough and underpaid to give the answer to create such a policy.
Thank you. Thank you. I thought that was an excellent answer nonetheless. Well done. We had a question down here at the front from this gentleman.
Good morning to you. Firstly, let me introduce myself. I am represent for GFAN. Some of you might know GFAN. Some of you might not know GFAN yet. So let me introduce about GFAN. GFAN is one largest financial alliance committed to the net zero transition. And GFAN is committed to the government of Vietnam at the state level. There will be at least around $8 billion to invest in renewable energy, coal retirement, grid development, renewable energy, and also energy efficiency. And so far, I have known that according to the recent MOAT survey, there are at least 22 to 25 private companies would like to get the DPPA. So GFAN would like to work out with these volunteers here for financing opportunity. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, yeah, those MIOT numbers I don't know the sample size, but I believe it was 58% of those sampled said they would be keen on the consumer side to participate in a DPPA regime. Slightly less on the developer side, but again, I don't know exactly the numbers or who was surveyed exactly, but clearly the demand is very strong on the buy side, at least for sure. Okay, any other questions in the room? Down the back there, please. Or in the middle. Sorry, next.
Hello. I'm Thuần. I'm come from cigarette paper factory. I want to ask some question with Mr. Bruno. Yeah. Could you please share your experience as a main electric user in industrial zone? Is there any other way that we can buy the green electricity? Because now we have only supplier EVN. Yeah. And the second question, could you share your experience about the status of BBA in Vietnam now? Thank you.
After this, I take a job with the government. I'll sort out the part that I can master myself. Can you, in an industrial zone, get other supply from EVN? I guess it's possible, but not necessarily. It depends on your industrial zone developer. If you would be a customer of deep sea industrial zones, we do not allow you to buy any other electricity than from us. And we decide where we source the energy from. So it's very different. And as we are taking great pride to be a pioneer to become an eco-industrial park according to the new law that just has been issued, of course we strive to become as green as possible in our energy mix. Today, industrial zones have the choice to either develop the electricity grid themselves or to outsource it to EVN. The bulk of the industrial zones do not see any benefit in developing an electricity grid. And that brings me to something that has actually not been really focused on. The real big problem is that nobody wants to pay for distribution, but everyone wants to have cheap green electricity. And Vietnam is actually in a luxury position. If you look, Vietnam can become 100% autonomous in its own supply. It has enough wind and solar capacity, but it doesn't have the highways to bring that energy to the places where they're being used. If we would consider Vietnam as a company, it's quite clear what we should do, right? Invest in the highways. And then start discussing how fast you can drive and how many trucks and cars you will allow on the highway. Today we discussed DPPAs. I remain convinced, after everything I heard, even if the DPPA is in place, when is your cigarette paper factory going to get green energy? Real green energy. I wouldn't dare to put my money on it. So the change in front of the people that need to make the policy of Vietnam is huge. And I believe only bold, drastic choices will make this happen. And if not, we will all have to be patient.
Thank you, Bruno. We had one last question down here at the back, please.
Since there was a lot of talk about the grid issues and also the curtailment risk, I would like to ask to what extent battery energy storage systems have been considered, considering, of course, the positive price reduction for mature technologies and also promising future technologies. Thank you.
Bruno, we can't afford you on this one, I'm afraid. Suji?
Sorry, I'm not going to answer it, but you do know you cannot build batteries today in Vietnam. The elephant in the room, there is no construction permit possible to do it.
Suji, your members big companies, do they have a position, or does the coalition have a position on this question of batteries, or anything to share?
To be honest, no. No, these issues, to be very honest here, we are really, well, the ASEC has priority countries where we really want to prioritize our policies and messages to be delivered from the members. So we're doing regular prioritization exercise on each of these markets, but to be honest, these topics never came up from our members as the priority to be considered in Vietnam.
Okay, Robert.
Maybe just one more generic comment, apart from the fact that, in fact, it is not possible to install batteries at the moment. So obviously renewable energy is volatile, and you will need to deal with that fact in the long term. And depending on what you install, it is more or less volatile. If you go for the solar rollout, then you need a lot of balancing. If you go for wind, you need a little bit less, and then if you go for offshore wind, you need even less. Going from very volatile to almost baseload. But this country is in a very fortunate position, which is that gas obviously is a relatively large part of the PDPA. There is a lot of history in deploying gas, and there's plans on doing so also in the future. So a combination of gas and renewables in a system that is well connected, and again we are back to the grid, is a very suitable solution, and typically much cheaper than taking these small, relatively small energy systems and then adding batteries to a solar plant or something and delivering into the consumer. But that is a very generic and more of a political vision that I'm addressing here. So we do obviously we do deploy and we do develop battery systems in all the countries we are working in, and we'll also proceed to do that here as soon as it's possible. But it's not a scalable solution, nothing in my view that belongs in a sort of a power development plan and a strategic vision for the country.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you to all our panelists. You've, I think, presented a very varied and expert view on a number of issues. I'm really grateful for your time and your insights. I'm grateful to Eurocham for putting this together. I think it's a very valuable forum. I'm grateful to everyone who was able to come here today to participate. Thank you very much, and thank you to my panelists.